When the phone rang that evening, I almost didn't answer. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that sinks into your bones after years of being alone. I was sitting near the window, watching the rain trace lines on the glass. I had a cup of tea in my hands that had gone cold long ago. I remember thinking, who could be calling me this late? When I picked up the phone, I heard a soft voice. It trembled a little, like the sound of someone unsure if they should speak. And then, I heard it, Mom. For a moment, my breath stopped. My heart felt like it had forgotten how to beat. I didn't say anything right away because I thought maybe I was dreaming. 10 years, 10 whole years had passed since I last heard her voice. 10 years of birthdays missed, of nights spent crying into my pillow, of words left unsaid. And now, suddenly, she was there, in my ear, in my heart again. I whispered her name, afraid that if I spoke too loudly, she would disappear again. Sarah, is that you? There was a pause and then a small sob. Yes, Mom. It's me. The sound of her crying made my eyes fill with tears. I pressed the phone closer, as if somehow I could hold her through the line. My hands were shaking. So many things I wanted to say. Where have you been? Why didn't you come back? Did I do something wrong? But none of those words came out. All I could manage was, I've missed you. She didn't answer right away. I could hear her trying to breathe through her tears. And then she said softly, I'm sorry, Mom. Those words, I'm sorry, they broke something inside me, but they also healed something at the same time. For years, I had imagined this moment. Sometimes in my dreams, she came running through the door, hugging me like she used to when she was little. Sometimes I woke up crying, calling her name into the empty room. But now, this wasn't a dream. My daughter was really there, speaking to me after 10 long years of silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. After we hung up, I just sat on the edge of my bed, replaying her voice over and over in my mind. It was softer now, more mature, but still the same girl who used to laugh at my silly jokes and braid my hair when I felt tired. I looked around the room, the same pictures on the wall, the same small memories that I never had the heart to pack away. Her childhood photo on the dresser, the pink shawl she left behind, even the old mug she used to use for her tea, everything was still there, waiting for her. As I sat there, memories began to flood back, one after another, like waves hitting the shore. The first time I held her in my arms. The way she would cling to me when thunder scared her. The long talks we had on the veranda when she was a teenager, dreaming about her future. She was my only child, my heartbeat, my purpose. I used to think no one could ever come between us. But life has a way of changing things slowly, without you realizing it. It starts with small misunderstandings, tiny cracks that seem harmless at first. Then one day, those cracks become walls, and you find yourself standing on the other side, wondering how you got there. When Sarah got married, I thought I was the happiest mother alive. She looked so beautiful that day, glowing in her red dress, eyes filled with love and hope. I remember holding her hand before the ceremony, trying to hide my tears. She squeezed it gently and said, "Don't cry, Mom. I'm not going far." But she did go far, farther than I ever imagined. In the beginning, everything seemed fine. She would call me every few days, telling me about her new home, her husband, and how she was learning to cook his favorite dishes. I could hear the joy in her voice. I prayed every night for her happiness. I used to keep my phone close to my bed, waiting for her messages, just to hear her laugh. But after a few months, her calls became shorter. Her messages came less often. Sometimes when I called, she would sound distracted or tired. She'd say, "I'll call you later, Mom," and then days would pass before I heard from her again. I told myself it was normal, she was busy, she was adjusting to married life. Every mother has to let go at some point, right? Then one evening, I called her as usual, and someone else answered the phone. It was her mother-in-law. Her voice was polite but cold. She said Sarah was busy and couldn't talk. I thanked her and hung up, but something about her tone stayed with me. I could sense something was wrong, but I didn't know what. The next time Sarah called, she sounded different. Her voice was distant, heavy. I asked her if everything was okay. She said, "Mom, I'm fine. Please don't worry about me." But mothers always know when something isn't right. That was the beginning of the silence that would last for 10 years. As I sat there that night after her call, I thought about those early days. I remembered how small things turned into arguments. I remembered the last time we spoke face to face, her eyes filled with anger and hurt, my heart full of words I couldn't say. She had come home for a few days back then. I had noticed she was quieter than usual. When I asked what was wrong, she hesitated, then said her in-laws didn't like her visiting me often. They thought she should focus on her new family, not her old life. I laughed it off, thinking it was just a small thing, something that would pass. I told her, "You're my daughter. No one can stop you from coming home." But maybe I said it too sharply. Maybe she went back and told them what I said and things got worse. I'll never know exactly. All I know is that after that visit, she started to drift away. Sometimes I replay those moments, wondering what I could have done differently. Should I have stayed quiet? Should I have tried to understand their side? Maybe my love became too heavy for her to carry. Maybe she just needed space, and I didn't know how to give it. For years, I lived in that house alone. Every festival, every birthday, I kept hoping she'd walk through the door. I kept cooking her favorite food on her birthday, white rice with lentil soup, just the way she liked it as a child. I'd light a candle and pray for her safety, even if she wasn't beside me. Neighbors would ask, "How is Sarah? Does she visit?" And I'd smile and say, "She's doing well, just busy." I lied to protect my heart. But inside, I felt the emptiness grow. Every corner of the house reminded me of her. The sound of the wind through the open window felt like her laughter. The smell of jasmine in the garden brought back the memory of her hair after a shower. Sometimes, I'd walk into her room and just sit on her bed, running my fingers over the blanket she left behind. There were days I thought of calling her. I'd pick up the phone, scroll through her old number, and then stop. What if she didn't answer? What if she had changed her number? That fear was heavier than silence. And so I waited. For 10 long years I waited. Until that night, when the rain fell softly against my window and the world seemed still, my phone rang again. And my daughter's voice came back to me. She said she wanted to come home. She said she wanted to see me. Her voice was trembling, and I could hear tears in it. I wanted to tell her to come right away, to tell her that I never stopped waiting, but my throat was tight with emotion. All I could say was, "Come home, my child. This house has been waiting for you." When I hung up, I sat there in silence for a long time. The rain had stopped, but tears kept falling down my face. The years of waiting, of loneliness, of unanswered prayers, it all came rushing back. But this time, there was something different in the air. Hope. I looked around the room again, at her pictures, at the memories that never left. I whispered to myself, "She's coming home." And for the first time in 10 years, I smiled. The next morning after that phone call, I woke up earlier than usual. The first light of dawn slipped through the thin curtains, and for a moment, I felt like the world had changed overnight. The air felt lighter, the birds outside seemed to sing a little louder. After 10 long years of silence, I finally had a reason to smile again. My daughter was coming home. As I moved around the house, I started cleaning everything, even the smallest corners that no one ever noticed. I dusted her picture frames, straightened the cushions on the sofa, and opened the windows to let the fresh air in. It was strange how something as simple as hope could make old hands move so quickly. I even found myself humming while sweeping the floor. Every small thing reminded me of her, the way she used to complain about the dust, how she would open the windows wide and say, "Mom, this house needs sunlight, not sadness." While I worked, memories of the past began to play in my mind again, the time before things went wrong. Sarah had always been a bright and kind child. She was the kind of daughter who filled the house with laughter. Even as a little girl, she had a gentle heart. If she saw a stray kitten outside, she would bring it home. If I looked tired, she would make me a cup of tea, though she could barely reach the stove. We used to sit together in the evenings, sharing stories, watching the sunset from the porch. She would rest her head on my shoulder and say, "You're my best friend, Mom." When she grew older, our bond didn't change. In fact, it became stronger. We would talk about everything, her dreams, her friends, her fears. She used to tell me she wanted a simple life, full of love and peace. "I don't need big houses or gold jewelry," she said once. "I just want to marry someone who understands me." When she met Amir, she was 25. I still remember the first day she told me about him. Her eyes sparkled in a way I hadn't seen before. She said, "Mom, I think I've met someone special." Amir was polite and soft-spoken when I first met him. He greeted me with respect and talked to me kindly. He worked in another city but often came to visit Sarah. They seemed happy together, and as a mother, that was all I ever wanted, to see my daughter smiling. When they decided to get married, I gave them my blessings wholeheartedly. The wedding was simple, just how Sarah wanted. I remember standing beside her that day, adjusting her veil, whispering, "You look beautiful, my child." She smiled, holding my hands tightly, and said, "Promise me you won't cry when I leave." Of course, I promised. But promises like that are hard to keep. After the wedding, she moved to Amir's house in another city. I missed her terribly, but I tried to stay strong. She called me often at first, telling me about her new life. She would talk about how caring Amir was, how she was learning to cook, how her mother-in-law taught her traditional recipes. I was happy knowing she was happy. But slowly, I began to notice small changes. Her voice wasn't as cheerful as before. Sometimes when I asked if everything was all right, she would hesitate and say, "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired." One afternoon, she called me crying. My heart stopped when I heard her voice. "Mom," she said between sobs, "they said I shouldn't visit you so often. They think I'm still too attached to you." I didn't know what to say. I felt anger rise inside me, but I tried to stay calm. "Sarah," I said gently, "you're married now, but that doesn't mean you stop being my daughter. You can visit anytime. This will always be your home." She was quiet for a long time before she whispered, "I know, Mom. But it's hard. You don't know how they talk to me sometimes." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her, wondering what kind of people she was living with. I had met her in-laws during the wedding, they seemed polite enough. But sometimes politeness hides pride. A few weeks later, I decided to visit her myself. I called first and she hesitated but agreed. When I reached her house, I noticed her mother-in-law's smile didn't reach her eyes. She greeted me, but her tone was stiff. Amir seemed uneasy too, like he was trying to keep peace between everyone. Sarah came out of the kitchen, her face lighting up when she saw me. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "I missed you so much, Mom." For a few minutes, everything felt normal again. We sat together, talked about little things, and I could see how much she was trying to make her new home work. But then, her mother-in-law made a remark that stayed with me. She said, "Your daughter is still learning how to be a wife. She's a bit emotional, but we'll fix that in time." I smiled politely, but inside, my heart hurt. Sarah's eyes lowered, she didn't say anything. When I left that evening, she walked me to the gate and held my hand tightly. "Mom," she said softly, "please don't say anything to them. It will only make things worse." I nodded, holding back my tears. I kissed her forehead and said, "Just remember, I'm always here." After that visit, her calls became less frequent. Sometimes I'd call and Amir would answer, saying she was busy. Once, I even heard her mother-in-law's voice in the background saying, "She's always on the phone with her mother." That sentence cut through me like a knife. I didn't want to cause trouble for her, so I started calling less. But the silence grew heavier with each passing week. Months went by. Then one day, I received a message from Sarah. It was short. She wrote, "Mom, please don't call for a while. Things are tense here. I'll reach out when I can." I remember reading that message over and over, trying to understand what it really meant. I wanted to go to her, to hold her and ask what was happening, but I respected her wish. I didn't call. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And then one day, I heard from a distant relative that there had been an argument at her home. They said Sarah had stood up for herself and for me. Her in-laws didn't like that. They accused her of being disrespectful, of letting me influence her. That was the word they used, influence. That night, I sat alone in the dark, crying quietly. I never wanted to come between her and her new family. I just wanted her to be happy. A few days later, I finally gathered courage and called her. She picked up after several rings. Her voice was trembling. I asked, "Sarah, what's happening? Are you okay?" She said, "Mom, please don't make it harder. They already think I listen to you too much." I didn't understand. "I'm your mother," I said. "You're my child. How can loving you be wrong?" She began to cry softly. "You don't understand, Mom. Things are complicated. I can't keep fighting everyone." My throat tightened. "Then let me talk to Amir," I said. "No," she interrupted quickly. "Please don't. It'll make things worse." There was silence between us for a long time. I could hear her breathing, the same rhythm I had known since she was born. I wanted to reach through the phone and hold her, but I couldn't. Finally, she said, "Mom, maybe it's better if we don't talk for a while." Those words hit me harder than anything I had ever felt. "You don't mean that," I whispered. She cried again and said, "I love you, Mom. Please try to understand." Then the line went silent. I sat there holding the phone, my heart breaking. I didn't know it then, but that would be our last conversation for many, many years. Days passed, then months, then years. I tried calling a few times, but the number was no longer active. Letters I sent came back unopened. No one told me where she had gone. I tried to stay strong, to tell myself she was okay, that she needed space. But a mother's heart never stops worrying. Every night, I prayed for her safety, for her peace. I asked God to protect her even if I couldn't. Sometimes I would dream of her. In my dreams, she was still the same, smiling, calling me Mom, holding my hand. But when I woke up, the bed beside me was always empty. I remember one morning, I saw her favorite flowers, white lilies, blooming in the garden. I took it as a sign that maybe she was thinking of me too. But the days kept passing, and her silence stayed. Even though I didn't know where she was, I never stopped believing that one day, she would come back. I never stopped waiting. And now, 10 years later, that belief was finally becoming real. The house that once echoed with her laughter would soon hear her voice again. I didn't know what she looked like now, how her life had changed, or what she had been through. But none of that mattered. She was my daughter. And I was her mother. No misunderstanding, no distance, no time could ever change that. As I stood by the window, watching the sky turn golden with the rising sun, I whispered to myself, this time, I won't let her go. That evening, the air felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of the years that had passed between us. I stood by the window, remembering the day everything broke. The day I watched my daughter walk away, not knowing it would be the last time I'd see her for 10 long years. It had been a bright morning when she arrived at my door. I still remember the way my heart jumped when I saw her standing there with her small suitcase. Her eyes were red and her face looked tired. She tried to smile, but it was the kind of smile that hides pain. "Sarah?" I said, rushing to her. "What happened, my child?" She didn't answer. She just hugged me, tightly, like she hadn't done in years. I felt her body trembling. When she finally spoke, her voice broke. Mom. I couldn't stay there anymore. I held her close, afraid to let go. It's okay, I said softly. You're home now. For a while we didn't speak. I made her tea, and we sat at the kitchen table in silence. The steam from the cups curled into the air, filling the room with a soft warmth. I didn't push her to talk. I knew she would tell me when she was ready. After some time, she said quietly, "They don't want me there anymore." I looked up at her. Who? What do you mean? She stared at the cup in her hands. My mother-in-law said I've failed as a wife. That I bring too much trouble into their home. That I let you interfere too much. I felt my chest tighten. Interfere? I never. I know, Mom, she said quickly, her eyes filling with tears. You didn't do anything wrong. But they think you did. Every time I call you, they say I'm still a child, that I don't respect them. Amir, he doesn't defend me anymore. He just stands there, silent. I wanted to scream, to tell her to leave them forever, but I stayed calm. Sarah, listen to me, I said softly. You don't have to prove anything to them. You're a good wife, and you've always been a good daughter. If they can't see that, it's their blindness, not yours. She shook her head slowly. It's not that simple, Mom. I love Amir. I tried to make peace, but his mother, she won't forgive me for being close to you. My throat felt dry. So what will you do now? She looked up at me with eyes full of confusion and pain. I don't know. I just needed to come here for a few days. To breathe. I reached across the table and held her hand. Stay as long as you want. This house is yours. For the first few days, she seemed better. She helped me cook, laughed a little, and even hummed old songs as she cleaned. I could see glimpses of the girl I once knew. But deep down, I knew she was struggling. Every night, she sat by the window, staring at her phone, waiting for a message that never came. Then, one afternoon, Amir showed up at the house. I still remember the knock on the door, sharp, impatient. I opened it to find him standing there, looking restless. He greeted me politely, but his eyes were cold. Can I talk to Sarah? He asked. She's inside, I said, trying to stay calm. Come in. When Sarah saw him, she froze. He didn't smile or greet her. He just said, pack your things. We're going home. Her hands trembled. Amir, please, let's talk. There's nothing to talk about, he said sharply. You embarrassed my family. You walked out without telling anyone. I couldn't stay silent anymore. She needed space, Amir. She was hurting. He looked at me with frustration. With all due respect, Auntie, this is between me and my wife. She's my daughter, I said, my voice firmer now. You can't just talk to her like this. Sarah stepped between us. Mom, please. Don't. Her eyes were pleading, full of fear. I took a deep breath and stepped back, not wanting to make things worse. She turned to Amir and said, I'll come with you, but please, don't blame my mother for anything. Amir's tone softened slightly. Sarah, I don't want to fight. But my parents are hurt. You can't just leave the house whenever you're upset. Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't leave because I was upset. I left because I couldn't breathe there anymore. His expression hardened again. Then maybe marriage isn't for you. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could feel my heart breaking as I watched my daughter's face crumble. Amir, please, I said quietly, she loves you. Don't say things you'll regret. But he had already turned toward the door. If she wants to come home, she knows where it is. He walked out, leaving the door half open behind him. The sound of it slamming in the wind echoed through the house. Sarah stood still for a long time, staring at the floor. Then, suddenly, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "He hates me now," she cried. "I've lost everything." I held her and whispered, "You haven't lost me, my child. You still have me." That night, she cried herself to sleep on my lap. I stayed awake, stroking her hair, praying silently for her peace. I wanted to protect her from everything, but I knew I couldn't. Some lessons in life are learned through pain, not advice. The next morning, she was quiet. She barely ate. She kept saying, "Maybe I should go back and apologize." "For what?" I asked gently. "For being human. For needing love." She didn't answer. She just looked away. I could tell she had made up her mind. Later that evening, she came to me while I was folding laundry. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for everything. But I think I should go back. Maybe if I apologize, things will get better." I turned to her, holding the clothes close to my chest. "Sarah, you don't owe them anything. You don't deserve to be treated this way." She smiled weakly. "I know. But if I don't try, I'll always wonder if I gave up too soon." I wanted to argue, but I saw the determination in her eyes, the same determination she had as a little girl learning to walk, falling again and again but always standing back up. I realized I couldn't stop her. So I hugged her tightly and said, "Go, my child. But promise me one thing, if they ever make you feel unloved again, come home. Don't suffer in silence." She nodded, tears falling down her cheeks. "I promise." When she left that day, I stood at the gate watching her taxi drive away. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I saw her for 10 years. For the first few weeks, I waited for her call. I told myself she needed time. But the weeks turned into months and months into years. I sent letters but they were never answered. I called, but her number had changed. Every day, I woke up hoping she would come, but the house stayed silent. There were nights I sat by the window, replaying her last words, "I promise." I told myself she must be busy, that she was fine, that maybe she had started a new life somewhere. But deep inside, I feared the worst, that she was hurt, or that she had chosen to forget me. Sometimes, when the loneliness became too much, I would talk to her picture. "Where are you, Sarah? Do you still think of me?" The house became quieter with each passing year. The walls seemed to listen to my whispers, the ticking clock my only companion. One day, I met an old neighbor who had visited the city where Sarah once lived. She told me she heard that Amir had gone abroad for work, and that Sarah had stayed behind with his parents. My heart sank. I wondered if she was still there, living in that same house that once made her so unhappy. I prayed every night for her to find peace, for her to find love again, even if it meant she would never come back to me. Because that's what mothers do. We pray for our children's happiness, even when we are not part of it. Years passed like that. Birthdays, New Year's, all came and went. I stopped expecting gifts or calls. But every time the phone rang, I still hoped it was her. Then, one day, a letter arrived. It had no return address, but the handwriting was hers. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single line. "Mom, I'm sorry for the silence. I'll explain everything someday." That was all. No date, no details. But that one line was enough to bring tears to my eyes. It meant she was alive. It meant she still thought of me. After that, there was nothing again. Silence returned, heavier than before. I began to live my life quietly, one day at a time. But I never stopped waiting. I never stopped believing that someday, somehow, she would come back. And then, 10 years later, when the rain was falling and the world seemed still, my phone finally rang. And I heard her voice again. The first few months after she left were the hardest. The house felt so empty that even the sound of the clock ticking seemed too loud. I tried to fill my days with chores, cleaning the same things over and over, pretending I had purpose. But every night, when I sat on the edge of my bed, it felt like all the walls were closing in. Her laughter used to echo through these rooms, and now there was only silence, a silence that pressed on my heart until I could barely breathe. Every morning, I made tea for two out of habit. I'd place her cup on the table, the one with the tiny blue flowers she loved as a girl. And every morning, I'd realize she wasn't coming. I'd pour it out quietly and whisper, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow never changed. People told me to move on, that time would heal everything. But they didn't know what it felt like to lose your own child while still being alive. It's not like losing someone to death. It's worse in a way because they're still out there breathing, living, just not with you. I'd see girls her age walking hand in hand with their mothers in the market, and I'd turn away quickly. It hurt too much. Sometimes I'd pick up something she liked, her favorite biscuits or the hair oil she always used, and then put it back on the shelf, realizing how foolish it was. I didn't even know where she was living now. Her number had changed. Her friends stopped visiting. Even her letters stopped after a while. For a long time, I thought maybe she had forgotten me completely. The years rolled on like quiet waves, slow and heavy. Seasons changed, but nothing in my heart did. I stopped celebrating my birthday. I stopped lighting candles on hers. The festival days came and went, lights outside, darkness inside. I'd sit near the window, watching the neighborhood children run around with sparklers, and I'd remember her little face glowing in the same light years ago. Sometimes, at night, I'd talk to her in my mind. I'd imagine her sitting next to me like before, listening as I spoke about small things, the garden, the neighbors, the new recipe I tried. I'd pause as if she was really there, waiting for her to answer. But all I'd hear was the soft hum of the fan, and my own heart breaking slowly. One winter, I got very sick. The cold had never felt so cruel. I remember lying in bed, shivering, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I wondered if I would ever see her again. I even wrote a letter then, though I had no address to send it to. My dearest Aisha, I wrote, my hands trembling, I don't know where you are or how you are, but I hope life has been kind to you. If I ever hurt you, please forgive me. Maybe I didn't understand what you needed. Maybe I let my pride come between us. I just want you to know my love for you never changed, not for a single moment. I folded that letter and placed it in a small wooden box, the same box where I kept her childhood drawings and old school photos. Every time I missed her too much, I'd open it and read her words from the past. I love you, Amy, written in her tiny handwriting with a red crayon. Years passed and I grew older. My hands became weaker, my eyesight dimmer. The garden she used to water turned wild, the roses overgrown and thorny. I stopped cutting them, though. Somehow, I liked them that way, beautiful but untamed, just like her spirit. There were days I'd hear a knock on the door, and my heart would race. I'd run to open it, only to find the mailman or a neighbor. Every time that happened, I'd smile politely, but inside, another small hope would die. Neighbors would sometimes ask, "Have you heard from your daughter?" I'd just say, "Not yet," and change the subject. I couldn't bear their pity. I didn't want anyone to see how hollow I had become inside. Once, a relative came to visit and told me they'd seen her at a wedding in another city. They said she looked happy, that she had a son now. My heart twisted hearing that. I was happy she was well, yet it broke me to realize I had missed so many years, her wedding, her motherhood, her laughter shared with someone else. That night, I sat in the dark for hours. I tried to imagine what her little boy might look like. Did he have her eyes? Her smile? Would he ever know about the grandmother who thought of him every day? I wished, just once, I could hold him and tell him stories like I used to tell her. As the years slipped away, I began to live quietly, like a shadow in my own house. My world had shrunk to a few rooms, a few memories. I spoke less, smiled less. My heart had grown tired of waiting. But still, deep down, I never gave up completely. Every night before sleeping, I whispered her name in my prayers. Protect her, wherever she is. Bring her peace. And if it is your will, bring her back to me someday. Then one rainy evening, something strange happened. I was sitting near the window, watching the drops race down the glass. The power had gone out, and the room was dim. The air smelled like wet soil, that scent that always made her happy. I closed my eyes, remembering her childhood laughter in the rain. Suddenly, I heard a faint ring, my phone vibrating on the table. I picked it up, expecting a wrong number. But when I saw the name on the screen, I froze. It was her. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. My heart started pounding. I stared at the name for several seconds before my trembling fingers finally pressed answer. There was silence on the other end, a soft, shaky breath, like someone trying not to cry. Amy. That one word broke me. It was her voice, a little older, deeper, but still my daughter. I felt a lump rise in my throat. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Aisha, I whispered, my voice trembling, is it really you? Yes, Amy, it's me. I covered my mouth and began to cry silently. I didn't want her to hear the sobs, but I couldn't stop them. 10 years of silence melted into that one call. She said softly, I didn't know if you'd still want to talk to me. Don't say that, I replied through tears. You are my daughter. There was never a day I didn't want to talk to you. We both sat in silence for a few seconds, just listening to each other breathe. I could feel the years of pain dissolving between us. I'm sorry, Amy, she whispered. I should have called long ago. I don't even know where to start. There's no need to explain, I said gently. You called. That's enough for me. But even as I said it, 1,000 memories rushed through my mind, all the words left unsaid, the night spent wondering if she hated me, the letters never sent. I wanted to ask her everything, where she was, if she was happy, if she had children. But I didn't want to scare her away by saying too much too soon. We talked for a few minutes, short sentences, careful pauses. Her voice trembled every time she said, Amy, like she was afraid it might break the moment. Before hanging up, she said, I want to see you. If you'll let me. I closed my eyes, tears spilling down again. I've been waiting for you, my child. Come home. When the call ended, I just sat there in the dark, clutching the phone to my chest. My whole body was trembling, from relief, from disbelief, from joy I didn't know how to contain. Outside, the rain kept falling softly. I looked up at the sky and whispered thank you. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart was racing, my mind replaying every word she had said. I went to the wooden box and opened it. Inside were all the letters, her photos, her childhood drawings. I ran my fingers over her little handprints made with red paint, the same ones she had made in kindergarten. My Aisha, I whispered, you're coming home. The next morning, I cleaned the house like I hadn't done in years. I washed her old curtains, wiped every corner, placed fresh flowers on the table. I wanted everything to feel warm, familiar, like the home she left behind, waiting just for her. As I set her cup on the table again, I smiled through my tears. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't pretending anymore. This time, she really was coming back. And though I didn't know what words we would say when we met, I knew one thing for sure, love had finally found its way through the silence. The day she was supposed to come, I woke up before dawn. The sky was still dark, a pale gray stretching over the horizon, and I could hear the sound of distant birds beginning their morning songs. My heart felt heavy yet light at the same time, a strange mixture of fear and happiness. I hadn't seen her face in 10 years. Would she look the same? Would she still recognize the mother she once left behind? I stood before the mirror, adjusting my shawl, and for a moment, I didn't recognize myself. The lines on my face had deepened, my hair had turned mostly gray. But when I looked closely, I saw the same eyes she once said were full of stories. I whispered to my reflection, she's coming home today. Even saying it out loud felt unreal. I spent the morning preparing things she used to love, her favorite lentil soup, soft bread, and the mango pickle she always fought me for as a child. The kitchen filled with familiar smells I hadn't breathed in years. As I stirred the pot, my hands trembled slightly, not from age but from emotion. Every movement carried memory. Around noon, I began to set the table. I placed her cup on the same spot, just like before. I didn't know what time she'd arrive, but I wanted everything to be ready, not just the food, but my heart too. Hours passed slowly. Each car that stopped near the gate made my breath catch. I must have checked the clock 100 times. The afternoon light began to fade into evening, and for a moment, I wondered if she'd changed her mind. Maybe the pain of the past had grown too heavy again. But just as that thought passed, I heard the sound of footsteps outside, hesitant, slow. I froze, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Then came a soft knock on the door. I turned toward it, my heart racing faster than it ever had. For a moment I couldn't move. My knees felt weak. Then I walked to the door and opened it. There she was. Aisha stood on the doorstep, holding a small bag in one hand, her eyes glistening with tears. She looked older, her face more mature, her eyes carrying the weight of years. Yet, in that very instant, she looked exactly the same to me, my little girl who once ran into my arms after school, laughing with her ribbons flying. For a long moment, we just stood there staring at each other. No words. Just the sound of our breaths and the quiet hum of the evening outside. Then she whispered, her voice trembling, "Amy." That single word broke the silence of 10 years. I took a step forward, my lips quivering, and before I knew it, she was in my arms. We held each other so tightly it felt like the world disappeared around us. I could feel her heartbeat against mine, fast, unsteady, full of emotion. Her tears wet my shoulder, and I didn't try to stop mine. For minutes we didn't speak. There were no words big enough to fill the space between us, only love, pure and wordless. When we finally let go, she looked at me with red eyes and whispered, "I didn't think you'd forgive me." I smiled weakly through tears. A mother never needs to forgive, my child. She only waits. Her face crumbled again, and she hugged me tighter. I could feel her shaking. I gently ran my fingers through her hair like I used to when she was small. "Come inside," I said softly, guiding her in. She stepped into the house slowly, her eyes moving from one corner to another, as if everything was familiar yet strange. The curtains, the table, the framed photos, all frozen in time. She stopped near the wall where her childhood drawing still hung, faded but precious. "You kept this?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. "Of course," I said. "I kept everything." We sat down together at the table. I served her food with trembling hands, and she smiled faintly. "It smells just like home," she said, taking a bite. "It is home," I replied quietly. For a while, we ate in silence. Then she began to speak, her voice low and uncertain. "Amy. I was angry back then. I thought you didn't understand me. I thought you chose others over me. I didn't realize how much it must have hurt you when I walked away." I looked at her, my eyes soft. "You were young, and I was stubborn. We both let pride speak louder than love." She nodded slowly. "After I left, I kept waiting for you to call. But when you didn't, I convinced myself you didn't care anymore." I sighed. "I called, Aisha. Many times. But your number had changed. Every ring that went unanswered broke me a little more. Then I stopped trying, not because I gave up, but because I wanted to believe you'd come back when your heart was ready." Her eyes filled again. "I thought of you every day, Amy. Every single day. I wanted to come back so many times, but I didn't know how. I was ashamed." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You came now. That's what matters." She squeezed my hand tightly. "When my son was born, I looked at him and realized what I'd done to you. I felt the pain you must have felt when I left. I wanted to call you that very day, but I couldn't find the courage. I smiled faintly, tears sliding down my cheeks. Sometimes life teaches us love through loss. She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. I missed you, Amy. More than I can say. I missed you too, my heart, I whispered, stroking her hair. But you were never gone from my prayers. The sky outside had turned deep blue, and the soft sound of rain began again, like the night she first called me. I got up to close the window, but she stopped me. Let it rain, she said softly. I like it this way. We sat together, listening to the rain pattering on the roof. It felt peaceful, like the earth itself was cleansing the years of distance between us. After a while, she stood and began walking around the room, touching old things, the photo of her father on the wall, the shelf with her childhood books. She picked one up and smiled faintly. You still have my storybook. I never threw away anything that reminded me of you, I said. Even the broken cup you once dropped. She laughed softly, wiping her tears. You kept that too? Yes, I smiled. Because it reminded me that even broken things can still be loved. Her laughter faded into silence, and she came back to sit beside me. Her eyes met mine. Can I bring my son here sometime? I looked at her with surprise and warmth. Of course. I'd love to meet him. I've dreamed of holding him. She smiled through her tears. His name is Hamza. He's 6. He asks about his grandmother sometimes. I always told him one day he'd meet you. My eyes filled again. Then that day will come soon. We talked for hours that night, about her life, her husband, the city she lived in, all the things I'd missed. Each story felt like a piece of her heart returning home. When she yawned, I led her to her old room. Everything was just as she had left it, her books, her bedspread, even the small crack on the mirror she made while dancing years ago. She stood at the door and whispered, "It still smells like home." I watched her sit on the bed and touch the pillow gently. I can't believe I'm here again, she said. I smiled. Home never forgets who it's waiting for. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking on her quietly through the half-open door. She was asleep, her face peaceful, the same way she looked when she was a little girl. For the first time in 10 years, I felt whole again. The next morning, sunlight poured into the house. It felt like the world had changed overnight. We had breakfast together, laughing softly between bites, as if no time had passed. When she left later that afternoon, she hugged me tightly at the door. I'll come back soon, Amy, she promised. I'll be right here, I said with a smile. She got into the car, rolled down the window, and waved until she disappeared down the road. I stood there long after, watching the empty lane, feeling both full and light. When I went back inside, the house no longer felt empty. Her laughter still echoed faintly in the air. Her cup was still on the table, but this time, I didn't clear it away. I let it stay, a reminder that love had returned home. That night, as I sat near the window again, watching the soft light of the moon fall across the floor, I whispered, "Thank you for bringing her back." The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. My heart was at rest. 10 years of silence had ended with one phone call, one embrace, one forgiveness. And in that forgiveness, I learned something: love doesn't fade with time. It waits patiently in the corners of our hearts, ready to bloom again the moment we let it. I realized that being a mother isn't just about raising a child, it's about loving them even when they walk away. It's about holding space for them to return, no matter how long it takes. If I could speak to anyone who's waiting for someone they love, I would say this: don't give up. Sometimes love takes the long way home. And when it finally returns, you'll understand that every tear, every prayer, every lonely night was never wasted. It was just love finding its way back, just like my daughter did. When my daughter called me after 10 silent years, I realized silence can't kill love. It only teaches it how to listen better.